There's a stadium so massive it can hold over 100,000 people, making it the largest on Earth. But almost no one talks about it. No global finals, no iconic matches, no viral moments. Because this isn't just a stadium, it's one of the most controlled, choreographed spaces on the planet. Built not for sport, but for something far more calculated. And once you see how it's actually used, the size starts to feel a little unsettling. From the outside, it looks exactly like what you'd expect. A massive, modern stadium, clean white arches stretching into the sky, designed to impress at first glance. The Rungrado 1st of May Stadium sits on an island in the middle of Pyongyang, surrounded by water like a fortress. At full capacity, it can hold 114,000 people, more than any stadium on Earth. Bigger than anything in Europe, bigger than anything in the United States, even bigger than venues built for the Olympics. On paper, it's a sports arena. Football matches, track events, national competition. That's the official story. But here's where things start to feel off. Because for the largest stadium ever built, something is missing. There are no legendary finals played here, no historic rivalries, no moments that shaped global sport. In fact, most of the world didn't even know this stadium existed for decades. And that raises a simple question. Why would a country build the biggest stadium on Earth and then barely use it for the one thing stadiums are meant for? The answer begins with how this place is actually used. Not occasionally, not seasonally, but with precision. Inside this stadium, every seat matters, every person matters, and every movement is planned. Because what happens here isn't a game, it's a performance. Thousands of people moving in perfect unison, flipping cards, forming massive images that can only be seen from a distance. Entire crowds turned into living screens. It's called the mass games. A spectacle so large it makes the stadium itself feel like just another prop. And suddenly, the size starts to make sense. Because this wasn't built to host a crowd. It was built to control one. To understand why this stadium exists, you have to stop thinking about sports entirely. Because in North Korea, architecture isn't just about function, it's about messaging. Every massive structure in Pyongyang is designed to say something, not to the outside world, but to the people inside it. And the Rungrado 1st of May Stadium might be the clearest example of that idea ever built. This wasn't constructed to host games, it was built to stage belief. In most countries, stadiums are where people come to watch something happen. Here, the crowd is what's happening. The mass games, officially known as the Arirang Festival, transform tens of thousands of participants into a single, synchronized machine. Children, students, athletes, all moving with exact timing, rehearsed for months. From a distance, it looks almost unreal. Entire sections of the audience flip coloured cards in perfect rhythm, creating giant moving images across the stands. Portraits, slogans, symbols. No screens, no digital effects, just people, arranged with absolute precision. And that level of coordination isn't accidental. It sends a very specific message. Unity, discipline, control. Because when 100,000 people can move as one, individuality disappears. And that's the point. The stadium becomes more than a venue. It becomes a demonstration, a visual statement that the system works, that everyone has a role, and that no one stands out. But there's another layer to this, scale. Because nothing reinforces power like size. The larger the structure, the smaller the individual feels inside it. And when you're sitting among tens of thousands of others, all acting in perfect sync, something changes psychologically. You stop feeling like a person in a crowd and start feeling like part of something much bigger. That's not by accident, that's design. Even the architecture reflects it. The stadium's 16 arching roof sections are said to resemble a magnolia blossom, a national symbol. Beauty on the surface, structure underneath. Everything about this place is calculated, not just to impress, but to influence. And once you see that, the stadium stops feeling like a world record and starts feeling like a tool. Building the largest stadium on Earth sounds impressive. Building it inside one of the most isolated countries in the world, that's something else entirely. Because when construction began on the Rungrado 1st of May Stadium in the late 1980s, North Korea wasn't exactly known for cutting-edge infrastructure or open access to global resources. There were no international partnerships, no global engineering firms, no outside oversight. Everything had to be done internally. And yet, what they built was staggering. The stadium covers over 20 hectares, an enormous footprint carved into Rungrado Island. Its structure rises in 16 massive arches, each one curving outward like petals of a flower, creating a roofline that looks almost delicate from a distance, but is anything but. Because underneath that design is raw structural force. Tens of thousands of tons of concrete and steel, layered to support not just a crowd, but synchronized movement on a massive scale. This isn't a passive audience space, it's an active one. Every section had to be engineered with clear sight lines, precise spacing, and structural stability strong enough to handle coordinated motion from tens of thousands of people at once. Then there's the logistics. Moving over 100,000 people in and out of a single venue isn't just difficult, it's dangerous if done wrong. So the stadium was designed with multiple entry and exit points, wide circulation paths, and tiered seating that allows for controlled flow. Not fast movement, controlled movement. Because speed isn't the priority here, order is. Even the field itself had to serve multiple purposes, sports, performances, mass choreography, requiring a flexible layout that could be adapted depending on the event. And all of this built without the transparency you'd expect from a project of this scale, which raises an uncomfortable question. If this much effort, precision, and resources went into building it, then the purpose behind it must have been just as important, maybe even more. From a distance, it looks effortless. Rows of people rising and sitting in perfect rhythm, colours shifting across the stands like a living screen, entire images forming and dissolving in seconds. But up close, this isn't effortless at all. It's engineered. Inside the Rungrado 1st of May Stadium, synchronization doesn't happen naturally. It's built through a system so precise that even a 1-second delay can break the illusion. Every participant has a role. Every seat has a function. Thousands of children and students are trained for months, sometimes longer, to perform in the mass games. Not just to memorize movements, but to execute them at the exact same moment. Because timing here isn't important, it's everything. Hidden coordinators direct the flow using signals that ripple through the stadium like a wave. Visual cues, audio triggers, pre-programmed sequences drilled into memory. From above, it looks like one giant organism. But in reality, it's tens of thousands of individuals responding to a tightly controlled system. Then there are the card sections. This is where things become even more precise. Entire blocks of spectators hold coloured flip cards. At the exact cue, they rotate them, instantly transforming the stands into massive images. Portraits, flags, symbols, all appearing in perfect alignment. No screens, no software correcting mistakes. Just human timing, trained to near perfection. And the margin for error? Almost zero. Because when one section moves too early or too late, the entire image distorts. Which means every person isn't just participating, they're responsible. Responsible for maintaining the illusion. Responsible for staying invisible inside something much larger. And that's the system. Not just physical coordination, but psychological alignment. Because to make 100,000 people move as one, you don't just control their actions, you shape their focus, their timing, their place in the whole. And when it works, it's mesmerizing. But once you understand what it takes to make it work, it starts to feel something else entirely. On the surface, the Rungrado 1st of May Stadium looks like a record-breaking achievement, the largest stadium ever built, a perfectly synchronized spectacle, a symbol of national pride. But scale like this always comes at a cost. And here, that cost isn't just measured in concrete or steel, it's measured in time. Because behind every flawless performance are thousands of participants, many of them children, training for months, sometimes up to a year, to perfect routines that last only minutes. Hours of repetition, strict schedules, little room for error. Not because they're chasing excellence, but because the system demands precision. And when tens of thousands of people are required to move as one, individuality becomes a liability. So it's minimized, replaced with uniformity. Even the audience isn't really an audience. They're part of the performance, holding cards, following cues, becoming pixels in a living display, which means the line between performer and spectator disappears. But the trade-off goes deeper than participation. There's also the question of resources. Building and maintaining a structure this massive requires enormous investment. Land, materials, labour, all concentrated into a single project. In most countries, a stadium this size would need constant global events to justify its existence. Here, it doesn't, because its purpose isn't economic, it's symbolic. And symbols don't need to generate profit. They need to send a message. The message is clear. Scale equals strength. Unity equals stability. But the reality is more complex. Because when everything is perfectly controlled, nothing is spontaneous. No unexpected moments, no unscripted reactions, just precision. And while that creates something visually powerful, it also raises a quiet question. What gets lost when everything is designed to look perfect? Because behind the symmetry, behind the coordination, behind the spectacle, there's a system working very hard to keep it that way. At first glance, it's easy to see this as just a stadium. A massive one, yes, but still just a place where people gather. But the Rungrado 1st of May Stadium isn't really about sports. It's about scale. And more importantly, what scale does to people. Because power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's visual. Sometimes it's psychological. And sometimes it's built into the very structures people sit inside. When you place 100,000 people in one space and make them move, react, and behave in perfect synchronization, you're not just creating a performance, you're demonstrating control. Not in an obvious way, but in a way that feels undeniable. The kind of control you don't question, because it looks like unity. And that's what makes this stadium different. Most of the world's biggest arenas are designed for unpredictability. Crowds reacting in real time. Moments no one can script. Energy that can't be controlled. Here, unpredictability is removed. Everything is rehearsed. Everything is timed. Everything is known in advance. And that changes the meaning of the space entirely, because instead of reflecting the crowd, the stadium shapes it. It defines how people move, when they move, and why they move. And when you zoom out, the message becomes clear. This isn't just architecture, it's infrastructure for influence. A place where scale is used to reinforce order, where precision replaces spontaneity, and where the crowd becomes part of the system itself. Which raises a bigger question. If a structure like this can shape how tens of thousands of people act, what else can be designed to do the same thing? Because the real story isn't just about one stadium in North Korea. It's about what happens when design, psychology, and power intersect at scale. And once you see that, you start to realize this might not be as unique as it seems.